This is going to be an interesting one. As you can tell by the way some of my colleagues and I are dressed, this is more of a fintech and the banking side. What's the relation between the two? What are the challenges that we see? Is a fintech disruptive, collaborative? What's the opportunities to continue to work together? What are some of the challenges? And we're going to finish off with a little bit of what do we see for the future? What's the opportunities? What are the main drivers in the market right now that we see? Is there a different technology that's going to be taking off? Or are there certain partners or corridors that are going to be key for fintechs and bank success going forward? A brief introduction as I see some of the new faces over here. I'm Erick Schneider. I'm on the board of directors for the CrossTech. I have tons of gray hairs proving my experience in the industry there. And I say experience, not expertise. There every day is something new. And I've been jumping around a lot. My wife has accused me of having FOMO, for example, and this is something that I definitely have. I've gone from the fintech side away from the traditional side, and I've jumped into the crypto side as well. I'm not ready to retire on a yacht just quite yet. There, I thought that was the plan. You get into crypto and you can retire in a year, but apparently it's a few years, so I'm patiently waiting on that. But we do have an excellent panel over here, and what we're going to do is just a brief introduction of each one, background, company that they represent, for example, and then we're going to get to the fun questions. And when I say fun questions, I'm going to do the light ones. I want you guys to do the challenging ones. This is going to be much more interactive. This is the fun part of having a smaller group is, let's hear from you guys. Are we hitting the topics that are going to be relevant to you? Is there something that's a burning question that's relevant to your company, for example, that you want us to address? I think that's the piece. Raise the hand. Throw a piece of popcorn at me, whatever the case is that's needed. Nothing's formal on this side. So, all right, let's start. I'll pass it over to Philip over here to introduce.
My name is Philip Daniel. I manage TerraPay Americas. I've been in the remittance industry for 18 years. I do have more gray hair than you, if that's mandatory.
More hair, too.
So, what TerraPay does is we build and manage a payments infrastructure, which enables our partners and their customers to send instant digital cross-border payments in around 103 countries. Today, the who is who of the remittance industry or the cross-border payments industry uses our infrastructure for instant and digital payments. MSBs, financial institutions, banks, telcos are our typical customers. We are a B2B player in the sense we only partner with other licensed entities. We're very proud of our instant digital capabilities. Today, we can process payments in 100 countries. 97% of those transactions gets delivered into a bank account or a wallet in less than a minute. The fastest transaction till date we have done was delivered into a wallet in 450 milliseconds. And within that time frame, we also complete the compliance checks. And talking about compliance, these days compliance comes first and everything else comes second. We are licensed and have regulatory approvals in around 26 countries globally. Yeah, that's about TerraPay. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gabriel Carvajalino. I'm Colombian, based in Colombia. Been in the business for 15 years, the cross-border business. First on the I used to work for a big bank in Colombia, building the infrastructure to receive transactions. Then I moved to the other side, working with a MTO, a digital MTO, and now I work with Thunes as managing the Americas region on the network side. Thunes is a fintech out of Singapore, with offices in various countries, and we serve similar to TerraPay. We have a very similar offer. We offer payouts in 130 countries, process all kinds of transactions from C2C and B2C and C2B and all those combinations. And we also have a collection business in which we can collect locally in country and perform the cross-border for those companies as well. Interesting journey. Happy to be here. I think that this topic applies exactly to what we are doing and trying to do, and it's just to find ways to make things better. A huge fan of what most companies are doing here. I do see the effort of everyone trying to evolve and changing from the traditional remittance business that you could see here 10 years ago to everyone just thinking about, hey, how can we change that, how we can collaborate with each other to make it better. So happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here today. Congratulations to all of you who made it to the last panel of the day. So good to see you all. My name is Shafiq Shariff. I head product and innovation at Pangea Money Transfer. We're a U.S.-based neobank for immigrants here in the U.S. We allow our customers to support their family and friends domestically and abroad. We're a 4.8, 4.9 star app in the app stores, and our primary use case is allowing customers to send money very, very quickly to their family abroad, as well as to pay bills to support their family abroad. We've expanded our offerings in terms of being able to work with banks and around banks, and as a fintech, to allow customers to, with their SSN, ITIN, and or matricula consular, allow migrants to gain a bank account. They can take their Pangea card, walk into one of 88,000 cash locations, and add cash to the app and send that abroad as well. Recently we hit an important milestone. We had an acquisition by Innova Financial, a big company, public company in Chicago, and they're a lender. They provide liquidity to customers who cannot access to traditional financial services. And with that backing and support, we've been able to get our app in front of more customers and are growing. And so excited for the journey ahead and for this conversation.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I am Santiago Bernal. I am the commercial director for STP. STP is a Mexican fintech that provides a direct connection with the Central Bank of Mexico, allowing all type of companies to do real-time wire transfers and to identify all the collections. So what we do is we work with 95% of the fintechs in Mexico, allowing them to do wire transfers. We also cooperate with companies like you, like Pangea, like Thunes, and soon with TerraPay, allowing you to do all these wire transfers to club accounts and cell phones soon, and debit cards. My background is STP. I have 8 years in this company, my first job since I graduated. But yeah, happy to be here with you as customers and friends.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that introduction there. What I think is interesting is we have a diverse group over here, right? And so I think when we're going to talk about the opportunities, this is the right time, and I hope to get different perspectives from each of you. The first one, and as a parent, you guys may understand, I have a 6-year-old, so I think in words of a 6-year-old would understand, the concept of frenemy. Right? So is this going to be a collaborator? Is this going to be a disruption? And each one highlighted a little bit of what your business model is. What's the relevance of banks? What's the concern of banks of working with you? Do you see them as a collaborator? Do you see them as someone that you want to replace? Is it a necessary evil? What are your thoughts there? And so if we can start with you there in Mexico.
Yeah, sure. Well, in our case, I think it's collaborative. We work a lot with banks because we're connected to the Central Bank of Mexico. So we are essential for them. Why? Because before some models like STP, banks just focused on, for example, in remittances, just from their own channel. Once STP allows companies like Pangea to do wire transfers to all banks, now it doesn't matter where I have my bank account, I can receive from all parts of the world and from all providers. So instead of them being jealous about us, they are thankful because they are increasing the amount of money that they have thanks to these disruptive models like Pangea and solutions of real-time payments like STP. We allow all type of companies to do real-time and 24/7. Banks just operate from Monday to Friday in some hours. So with these disruptive models, then their customers can receive money on weekends, and that was something that 10 years ago was not on scope. So that's the reason that STP is 15 years old now, and we have a very good relation with banks. They have their own business. Our business is just doing wire transfers, so instead of doing a battle, we are just allies.
So Mexico, in addition to having better food than the United States, also has faster real-time payments as well there than the United States.
Yes, we do. I can say that it's one of the top 3 systems in the world. We are ahead of Brazil with Pix. We are learning from them because we have this new product called Cody, that actually it was born before Pix, but it is not as successful as Pix. No, so we are still learning of these new payment methods in the world and try to evolve like them. But Spay is one of the safest and real-time payment gateways. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Shafiq, you had brought up a little bit about the value proposition of Pangea, for example, issuing a card and all. Do you use this with an underlying issuing bank, and so there's a relationship that you have as far as a necessary on that? And if so, what are some of the opportunities that you see working with banks and some of the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is I think we used to talk about this buzzword a while back about the unbundling of banks, right? Which I don't think I've heard about recently, but like many of these buzzwords, they kind of actually start to come true over time. I mean, there are so many, use cases around finances and financial access in the U.S. that no single bank can really meet them all. And so what fintechs have done, in my view, is that they've really made very, very real, very point solutions that really fulfill each individual use case. So things like remittances or personal loans or auto loans, high interest savings accounts are starting to happen, investments. And so these fintechs are becoming very specialized around very specific use cases, allowing customers ultimately to be able to mix and match, kind of pick out the portfolio of services that they want to be able to use, that they trust, that really fit what they need. And I think the best banks, like the ones that are really kind of starting to evolve, are realizing that they can't fulfill everything, and so they are becoming the platforms ultimately. And they're offering the ability to leverage their charters, making sure that we're in compliance, doing the right things by the consumer, making sure that we're in regulatory compliance, and offering that out as a way for them to continue to collect deposits, and having us be able to really build out our specific use cases. In our case, for our migrant population, and I'd say the key to success there that we found is really alignment at the end of the day with the bank that you choose on mission. Like they really have to believe what you believe. They really have to think carefully about the consumer that you think about. So when you think about the migrant consumer, we've done a lot of work around, say, KYC. How do we get our consumers that bank account? How do we provide them with the right tools? How do we bring together the full portfolio around things like cash loads? So I'd say if there's one piece of advice that stands out to me that really helps us be a successful partnership is the idea of like alignment on mission.
On that point, that's an interesting one. There is not all banks are created equal, right? You've got some of the larger ones, Wells Fargo, for example, the Bank of America, but then you have some of the larger ones that have come through that are much more fintech forward. You've got Cross River, for example, their SVB. What are your thoughts on those banks, and when you're talking about finding the right mission on that side? Have you found that solution, and is it based on that type of vision? Are they more fintechy, or what has worked for Pangea?
Yeah, and it's not just so I think there's sort of the fintech forward tech savviness. I think that's really one axis, and then there's almost the compliance regulatory view of how the bank will proceed and how they'll think about your customer base and the risks that they take on. And so those are two very different axes. And so what's really interesting is start to see more and more of the platforms that will apply the technology layer, so being fintech forward, and then being able to apply that to different community banks that have very specific missions. So I think there's a whole game now around really understanding and being able to select from a marketplace almost the bank that works best with you. And so in terms of Cross River, SVB, we've actually found some good mission fit in conversations we've had around with some of those banks, and they are trying to do the right thing in a lot of ways. But even then, I think there's the option to mix and match the tech with the bank so that you have the opportunity at some point to switch, or potentially to have multiple banks work together with you on different use cases with a centralized technological layer. So I think that system and that ecosystem is really, really evolving.
Which is an ideal world as opposed to 10 years ago when the biggest concern is, do we have any type of what's the disintermediation? The word that they have, the de-risking. That's the word I was looking for. Where banks say, yeah, I don't feel comfortable working with, right? We were, in the remittance side, beggars, right? And we're saying beggars couldn't be choosers. And where financial institutions such as banks were saying, you have to abide by this structure, that's one thing, but you have to abide by this price schedule, which is another, charging a premium or requiring to have transactions going through, such as foreign exchange, in order for the bank to make enough money to justify keeping remittances or MTOs on board, which is a little frustrating, of course, and it definitely hits into the bottom line. I'll ask the two closer to me there. Gabriel, if you could start, talk a little bit about the B2B model there, which you and Philip had identified there going forward. Banks are your partners, and you had mentioned your presence in Latin America, for example, and around the world there. How has that worked? How are they different than working with the fintech? Are they better? Are they faster? Are they cheaper? Is it all the same? Is it kind of like what Shafiq had mentioned there as far as just finding the right model and a right alignment with mission? What are your thoughts on that?
So what we've seen, we were perceived as of course, as innovators, and as we wanted to take a part of their business at the beginning. And what we were trying to do is just finding ways to do better things for the benefit of the consumer at the end. Either a person or a company or whatever it is. And banks at first thought they were being challenged, and they were super protective of their business, and the risking came, and we don't want to work with fintechs, or we don't want to work with these innovators because they're after something that we have done forever. And what we found was, and what we were able to show them, is that we are just here to make things better for the customers. So, and that actually benefits banks, because there's some things that they will want to do and we're trying to do, but they were not capable of because of many reasons. Because their infrastructure, it was too difficult to move around, because they were too slow or too big or too small, or because it was just not a priority for them. And then companies such as ours come and say, hey, we have this solution, you could just plug and play with this, and we'll make the experience for your customers a lot better. And the service that they will perceive will be increasing better. And we are not after Thunes being the recognized name for that. We are just going to provide a service for you, for your customers. And so ego aside, we don't mind if Thunes is not in people's mind at the end. We just want to perform a business that will benefit you and benefit the customer at the end. And if they don't know what Thunes are, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're just there to provide a service. So, yeah, currently it's now more about collaboration. And we spoke in a panel this morning, and it was just about how we can collaborate with each other among us. I mean, I work with STP, we're partners with them, we are great competitors with TerraPay, but at the end, we can collaborate with each other. Hey, there's some things that for sure you can do very good, and you can help us out, and the opposite. So at the end, it's not only with banks, but among the industry is, hey, if you know how to do things, help me. That I'm sure I will help you with something that you need.
Philip, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, there, to see if you share that same friendly vision and towards the banks.
Absolutely. I was thinking of, when your 6-year-old daughter has the term frenemy, at TerraPay we use a term called co-opetition. So it's not competition, right? So it's like, as my friend said, we can work together as well, and we do, in fact. So there are certain markets where TerraPay process the local platform, or the local platform is powered by TerraPay, and some of our competitors can use that, right? And it is happening. But coming back to the topic with very specifically to banks, our partnership with banks, if you look at it, it evolved, right? I mean, initially, why do we need a bank in this business? One, on the receive side, you need a bank to process your transactions, right? And eventually, I mean, maybe many years before, it was like sending a draft, and that draft get printed, it evolved, and then now it is like we process payments within seconds.
You really are old.
Yeah. Right? So from that draft getting printed, now, as I said, fastest transaction was done in 450 milliseconds. Within that time frame, we complete. So the banks have become more and more comfortable with fintechs. They value our partnership. That's one part of where we cooperate with the bank. Then we need bank as a settlement partner, right? Without a bank, how will you settle? How do you do your bulk settlement? And these two things have been going on for some time. Something which has recently changed from our perspective is large banks in the US, banks in Latin America, banks in different parts of the world now use the TerraPay rails for payments. It's not the other way. it's like big banks, and specifically they use someone like a TerraPay or even my friend here, their rails, as a solution for small or mid-ticket size SWIFT payments. So think about it this way. A bank which is used to only make SWIFT payments, someone wants to send $1,000 to someone. The beneficiary will get most likely a $990 or a $975. They have to spend a $25 in fee. You don't know when you will get it because it can, like you send it on a Friday, you will most likely get it on a Monday or a Tuesday. That's
Assuming
where
there's a direct correlation, unless it's a hub and spoke where it goes from one bank to the next bank to the next bank.
Exactly, and in many correspondent banks, everybody takes a cut, and the beneficiary gets $20 less. So that's where we find this competition even stronger. We have large banks now using the TerraPay rails for these mid and small ticket size payments. So it is, at the end of the day, competition, yeah.
Excellent. I like that word. It's much more sophisticated than mine. As I'm talking about my family, I was thinking my wife enjoys watching these murder shows. And I hope it's much more for entertainment than it is for personal research there, but time will tell. One of the things that the detectives always say is who benefits, the Latin term of qui bono, right? It is like who benefits from this and what's the rationale for doing it. So usually it's the spouse in the shows that we watch. In this case, I've heard a lot, and Santiago, you started there by saying the banks are benefiting from. Right? And there's a direct benefit, I think, to the banks working with the fintechs on there. But what about on the flip side of that? Do you see that it has become easier to work with banks? Are they asking for less as far as regulatory requirements from a due diligence standpoint, willingness to work with the rails, like Philip had mentioned there, being able to be a partner? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Anybody that wants to take it?
I'll take it. Yeah, it's way easier. I used to work for the bank, and the way we saw fintech at that moment was completely different of how fintechs are perceived by banks right now. And like Santiago said, it's just that they know that companies such as ours can bring value to them, and they are willing to bet and adjust things and even work with regulators towards allowing fintechs to provide services that they themselves cannot do. So at the end, and we were talking about this morning again about Rappi. Everybody knows Rappi nowadays in the region. And
just a brief introduction. It's like Uber, for example, in Latin America.
Yeah, it's
there are Uber Eats that being able to do everything.
It started like that. It started like a grocery delivery app, and now it's a super app with a mobile wallet, and they sell everything. But one of the first investors that company had was actually a big bank in Colombia, because they saw value there, and they saw, hey, these guys are doing something that we ourselves are not capable of doing, and we don't want to miss that. And they adjusted infrastructure just to allow them to do what they're doing. They even allow their mobile wallet to be run in the rails of the bank. And that was unthinkable at the beginning. Like, why are they supporting someone that is actually after a business they're good at? And they realize it's just that we are not capable of moving as fast, but we definitely want to add value to our customers. So at the end, yes, I think banks have identified that more than trying to get a piece of their business, we are here to help them gain business and to be part of something that otherwise they will not be part of.
Yeah, I'll just add something to this. The answer to a question is, let's say banks onboarding someone like a TerraPay, right? Again, you can categorize it. Like someone like you mentioned the names like CRB, for example, a Cross River Bank, or those genre of banks, the onboarding is much faster, if you ask me. They're more receptive, I would say. The large banks or the tier 1 banks, you still have very conservative compliance team who have a different perception on onboarding. At the end of the day, as I said, we have done this with large banks, they have done that. But again, I'll give you an example. We have a partnership with a large bank, and they are using our rails. They have something called as a whitelisting, which is first they whitelist TerraPay for this particular service. And let's say TerraPay pays out in hundreds of banks in India, for example. They have to whitelist all those 100 banks as well. So that's a painfully time-taking process, right? So again, it depends from bank to bank, but I see a big change in the overall process. Yes, it can still take time. We have had experience where some bank would have taken 2 years, some would have taken 1 year, some would have taken just a month.
What are those banks that just take a month?
Yeah, so it so there are different categories, but we see a complete shift in the attitude. Things are much better than it used to be. Yeah.
Glad to hear it. Santiago, going back to you, hear your thoughts, and especially with STP, right? Working with traditional banks of Mexico versus the digital wallets, the CLAR and the ALBO, for example. Is there openness from the banks to offer the STP service through all of it and the Clave?
Correct. It's pretty interesting what is happening in Mexico because we were also one of the first countries to have this fintech regulation. So in the past, we had every month a new fintech creating in Mexico. Right now, to create a new fintech is 2 years. Okay, so it's really difficult to create a
This
new
is under
fintech.
the IFPE license.
Yeah,
I'm
on
guessing,
IFPE
right? That has been
license.
severely delayed. Yeah.
Correct. So what is happening now, banks are developing new products, new e-wallets, or they are acquiring some fintechs, and at the end of the day, they are like going ahead of this market because creating a new one is very, very difficult. And all these fintechs like Albo, all the ones that you say, because of this new regulation, they will need to connect directly to the Central Bank of Mexico and become more like a bank. So it's interesting how each country operates, but in Mexico we're seeing that they are becoming more like banks.
And banks are becoming more like
And
fintechs as well,
exactly,
right? On the flip
exactly.
side of that.
Exactly, because and that's what I was answering in the other question. I believe is we are all in the same ecosystem, so we learn from the other. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win for the user, and that's the most important.
Shafiq, for you, is it a win-win there? Do you see it? Is it faster to do a due diligence now than it was before?
Yeah, I think it's definitely evolving in that direction. Just, I mean, it's so much more mainstream, the idea of having fintechs and all the use cases that are cropping up. The conversations have been had, the rails have been tried. Everyone has a better sense of what the playbook means and what the implications are. And I used the word the last time that I think is important in this context is marketplace. And what that means is a couple of different things. One is more banks have more access now to being able to participate in the fintech ecosystem, whereas it was very closed off before. Now that you have the platforms that can integrate into cores and kind of provide more access to smaller community banks, I think that the range of options is larger. And what's also happening is competition. No one wants to lose out on the next big fintech. Everyone wants the deposits, and so that's just greasing the wheels and kind of creating more options and more willingness for more players to play in the fintech ecosystem.
That's an interesting one because I think it leads well into the next topic that we have, which is how do we see banks and I guess potential hurdles they're going forward from a regulatory standpoint? You say, a bank is slower to adapt and to go through, which is not necessarily the case in some of the examples that we heard, but they're also better funded, larger, more established, better relationship with regulators, for example. Do they have a leg up in this? Is there a challenge that fintechs have and continue to grow? Or does a bank say, the easiest thing to do is buy the fintech in a down market, and that could be a potential exit strategy? What are some thoughts on that, especially around the regulatory market?
Yeah, so at TerraPay, we are a license-hungry company. We try and get licensed in wherever market's possible. So today we have our own licenses and regulatory approvals in around 26 countries. So that certainly gives a lot of comfort. For example, if let's say someone who wants to launch their service in the US, for example, if you have a license in the US, I think the banks perceive you in a different way. So that's where, so today we have our US license, and what that opens us, we are not a consumer-facing brand, so we don't want to get licensed in all the 50 states. We just get licensed in, for example, Florida, and then we can have partners which are licensed in other states, for example. That helps us in many things. One, you give the bank a comfort that, okay, we are also licensed in the same country that you are, which gives them a comfort, especially when it comes to onboarding. Those who want to open settlement bank accounts, if, let's say, if TerraPay was only licensed in, let's say, for example, UK, and if I approach a bank in the US for a bank account, the onboarding might get delayed. It's perceived differently. So in our experience, more and more regulatory approvals, more and more licenses definitely helps. We are trying to replicate the same thing in Mexico. We talked about IFPay license, a money transmitter license we're getting in Mexico. We are also planning for a second license in Latin America. Again, also to give comfort to the bank partners. Yes, we are licensed in the same jurisdiction that you are. So that's certainly a help. It is helping TerraPay. Yeah.
But there is a cost that comes with that and an allocation of resources as well, right?
Absolutely. But again, compliance comes first these days, right? Business comes second. One wrong transaction can close companies down, right? So that's something which we are willing to accept that cost, because it somewhere down the line it is going to help business, even if it's a cost. But we believe, and it has proven in TerraPay's case, right? 26 licenses and regulatory approvals. It has really worked for us.
If FTX had heard your discussion 2 weeks ago, we may not be in this fiasco as it is. Nicely done.
Absolutely.
No, but you know what? Like, there's two ways to see that, because at the end, and going back to what we were discussing before, on how banks feel more comfortable now working with companies like fintechs and others, is that you can take those approaches in which yeah, you're going to pay it in 100 countries and you get licensing as much as you can, but it proves to be costly, and it is costly and it's difficult. But previously, that was the only way to do it. Otherwise, there's no way. Now, because of how fintechs and companies have been more sophisticated about compliance first, now we built, at Thunes, for example, we actually own a platform that we sell to banks that will help them with compliance. So we actually own that. And now when we go to a country in which we have no interest in being licensed, because whatever reason it is, it's costly, we don't know. Banks are more open to support you and sponsor you even, because they know that what you're doing is the right thing to do. So it could be, yeah, it could be both those approaches, but at the end, if we go back, it's just how things has changed that you actually have that option now. That was unthinkable before. Now you can approach a bank and say, hey, will you sponsor our operation in this particular country? And this is what we've built regarding compliance and regulatory requirements, whatever. And if we need to adapt to something that you need, this is what we can do with it. And we use technology to adapt to that. So there's options. So and you just can get and choose, hey, what works better for you.
Well, just like you were talking about the things have changed and evolved I'd love to wrap up right now and hear a little bit about what do you guys expect for the future? And what's the vision of working with banks from a regulatory standpoint, and even from a country that you mentioned, Cody, for example, Santiago and Gabriel, you've got the announcement about Visa that came out, and you spent a lot of money on PR, and even though you say Thunes doesn't care about branding, it spends a lot of money on branding there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the industry. Which way is it going forward? Are we going to have banks? Is Netflix going to have a bank there? Or are we going to work as fintech in the future? And when am I going to return my yachts? But I'll answer that last question later.
Yeah, I mean, I think as the competition evolves, we end up with more of a marketplace, and we end up with more banks overall participating. I think the options will be based on really size of company. I think it will help smaller companies pick up and go faster. I think to your point earlier about compliance and being able to leverage what the bank knows from a compliance perspective, we took advantage of that. I mean, we're an MSB. Our compliance is very native to what we do, and we appreciated actually having these extra layers of compliance for us to get started as a fintech. And I fully see that as companies gain more volume, become bigger, start to look at their own charters, we'll start to see those bigger banks start to build out. Like Netflix could be a bank at some point, or PayPal, et cetera. But yeah, that's sort of where I see things moving and this relationship.
Excellent, thank you.
Perfect. From my side, we are We are putting everything in Cody. As I told you, Pay is a very good system, but the future is Cody. So it's 2 years since the launch from the central bank for this product, and is very good, but is not as big as Brazil. So what we're trying is to push more this model, and in next year we expect to have this solution to do payments just to the cell phone of the person. So in remittances, you will just need the cell phone of this person. Doesn't matter if you have their bank or a clave, anything. You will send a real-time payment.
Less than 450 milliseconds, like Philip at
Exactly.
TerraPay? All right.
Exactly. So that's the future. And also in Mexico, we are seeing a lot of crypto interest. So we are as well exploring this market and working with
Let's
crypto
talk further about
wallets.
crypto after this then, because I got some
Perfect.
ideas.
For TerraPay, right now we can pay into around 4.5 billion bank accounts globally and 1.5 billion mobile wallets in 100 countries. Next year we want this 100 countries to be around 150 countries. That's what we aim for. Digital instant payments. Apart from that, we also have some new products which we have launched and we'll be focusing on that. For example, we have something called as Request to Pay. So we are connected to 1.5 billion wallets, and we enable these wallets to make a payment. Let's say, for example, a Kenyan who has a M-Pesa wallet, if he travels to Dubai, we can enable him to make the payment using a wallet. That's something which we have launched, and we will be offering this in much more countries. We are going to enable our partners in acquiring-led remittances. We have something called as a purpose-based remittance, which is more of bill payments or top-ups and other things. Yeah, but the future is, I would say, definitely bright. Payments is evolving new. Every day we talk about new opportunities with our partners, even this conference. It's not just the usual cross-border payments, B2B payments. We are now big into that. And very importantly, if you look at, because this is also very specific, cross-border payment specific conference, the global migration is going to further increase. I live in Canada, and last year Canada alone welcomed 500,000 new immigrants. They need another 1.5 million immigrants in the next 3 years. And global migration is going to increase significantly. So the future is bright. Yeah.
Love it.
For us, I think that what Thunes is trying to do is we want to provide every single solution for cross-border in just one shop. And is that, yeah, we do payouts and we can continue to do that, but we're building this infrastructure about collections and the ability to offer one person to buy a product with his or her mobile wallet locally in Honduras and paid for a product that is being shipped from China in Lempiras in Honduras. And it has to be seamless, and we should be able to provide that and to collect that money locally, and then we'll take part of the cross-border part, but that same person needs to receive a transaction from his mother that lives in the US, and Thunes can provide that. So at the end, it's just how we can leverage our infrastructure and leverage our ability to enter any market and provide that cross-border business regardless of it's a payout, it's a purchase, it's e-commerce, or whatever it is. That's what I see out of Thunes in the next couple of years is how we can offer everyone, any company, the ability to move funds from A to B, regardless of the purpose of that transaction.
Well, next year at the conference, I'll ask you if you beat TerraPay's 4.5 billion and 1.5.
We might use them for that.
It's competition.
There we go. Listen, it's happy hour there. Cocktails are waiting for us all there. So what I would suggest there, in the interest of time, is if there are any additional questions from the team, find me if you want an informal chat, or find the smart people. I would strongly recommend there to have insightful discussions, partnerships, opportunities, and hit them with the tough questions. Thank you guys for joining.